One of the discussions I want to have relates to Donald Trump's upcoming term. And I think it's a really critical term. And what we're seeing with Donald Trump sprinting to fill out his cabinet and to get things going and to really come in running, as it were, his feet hit the ground running. And I think it's a vast change from the first term of Trump. Trump 2.0 looks like they are ready, but I also think it's a specific reason they have to come in and be ready. And there's a great piece in the Washington Times from our next guest, from Scott Rasmussen. It is headline, Trump's Real Challenge, Managing Expectations and Focusing on Reality. I agree with so much in this story, but I want to break it down with Scott and get all of his take on it. Great to have you here, Scott Rasmussen. Thank you, sir.
Well, Mike, it's great to be with you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Now, just a total sidebar, ADD brain taking over here. Are you a turkey guy? Are you a ham guy? Are you a beef guy?
Well, I'm a turkey guy, and I'm also a pollster, so I know that 83% of voters say they have a lot to be thankful for this year. 92% are going to celebrate, and of those, 70% are eating turkey. So, we're in the majority.
I should have known better, Scott, than to ask you a question. You just come with facts and stats right out of the blocks there. That's great. That's fantastic. Do you know how many people are going to be eating tofurkey, the worst dinner ever?
No, I don't have that, but I know that about half of people say they're probably going to eat too much. So, we know what this holiday is about, and it's really the beginning of a great season. But this year, it's obviously much different with the beginning of a new presidential administration and quite a change coming to official Washington.
Yeah, it feels like this is even a bigger change than 2016. It feels like it's not just because it's an exchange between Biden and Trump, but it feels like this is a new and different Trump. And I mentioned I feel like this administration's coming in running. They're going to sprint in. And I'm feeling those first 2 years are really critical and important. And it feels like in your piece in the Washington Times, you're seeing the same thing. Those first 2 years are vital.
Absolutely. Look, this is much different than 8 years ago. 8 years ago, the president-elect was shocked at how many people he had to appoint. He didn't have the institutional support. This time he does. But the thing that I cited in my article is there's a funny dynamic here. If the president in the next couple of years can succeed in meeting some of the basic priorities that voters want from him, basically making sure we have a stronger economy that works for everyone and securing the southern border and, returning a little bit of sanity to things like gender identity. If he can get some of those things done, he has a tremendous opportunity to really complete a political realignment, to prepare the way for a period of Republican dominance. The threat to that, though, the flip side, obviously, is if he doesn't succeed in those next 2 years, it's going to be troubling. The immediate impact would be we would have another change election, and Democrats would get control of the House and Senate for the final 2 years of his term, and it would be a much more difficult slog. And in trying to get to all that, I think the biggest threat the president-elect faces right now is his most enthusiastic supporters. They are throwing around terms like landslide when it clearly doesn't apply. And when I say it's not a landslide, I'm not taking anything away from the victory. It was a significant victory. It was decisive. It does confirm that the fluke was not 2016, but 2020. The president has a great opportunity, but it's important to remember this is only the first step. You've got to govern well. You've got to remember that just over half the country voted against President Trump. Got to remember that the House of Representatives is still in Republican hands, but it's so close. This is the third straight election that has resulted in the House of Representatives being controlled by single-digit numbers. And the last time that happened, It was even before I began polling. It was back from 1789 to 1795, the very first three Congresses. So there's a lot of work to do, and the challenge is going to be not to get caught up in internal fights.
Well, that is the key, and that's always been one of the things that I've observed as a downfall for GOP control. The Democrats seem to have corralled their caucuses together over the last several Congresses, right, and they vote in lockstep, whereas you have internal battles with the GOP, and that splinters, and you don't have room to splinter. As you pointed out, this margin of control is so tiny, and with Donald Trump picking people out of the House to be part of his government, it's also going to threaten that as well. And you also brought up something in this piece in the Washington Times, Scott Rasmussen, where you talk about those groups that have voted for Donald Trump in greater numbers than they had in the past, some of the groups like the Hispanics and the African-American voters, and those voters are expecting something quickly. They want change now. And if they don't get it in 2 years, like you said, that midterm election could be transformational in a negative way for the GOP.
Right. The good news from this election for the GOP is black voters, especially young black voters and Hispanic voters, voted for the Republican in record numbers. And we should really focus on the fact that a lot of it had to do with the working class connections of those voters. You know, among black voters with a college degree, only 5% voted for Donald Trump. Among black voters without a college degree, 19% voted for Donald Trump. So we're seeing that same kind of economic divide that we're seeing among all voters. And sure, the good news is they voted for Trump. They voted for some Republican senators. They voted to keep, in a way that kept control of the House. But they are not in the Republican coalition. They are giving the Republican coalition a test drive. And so if it doesn't work out, they will flip back in the other direction just as dramatically 2 years from now and probably 4 years from now. And again, you said it at the beginning. These first 2 years are critical. The president has a clear mission from the voters, and it starts with making the economy work for all Americans. It certainly involves securing the southern border. That's been the biggest issue for this president from the moment he came down that escalator long ago now. And the other one is, again, that sense of normalcy, gender identity and other topics that have just gone off the rails. If he can make progress in the next 2 years, get some policies through, get some confidence back in the American people, then some of those new Republican voters will stick around and become part of a lasting governing coalition.
The 2-year test drive, I think that's the headline for another article, Scott Rasmussen. We're talking to Scott. He, of course, the president of RMG Research, the founder of Napolitan Institute. And Scott, you know polling from your years with Rasmussen and now onto another arena. Can I ask you about polling? We're now seeing some of the responses out of the Harris campaign, people like David Plouffe saying, we were never in the lead. We never had a lead. Trump was always ahead of us. Are they blame storming to try and offload some of the responsibility for the loss, or was that what you were seeing as well?
Oh, they were absolutely trying to avoid some of the blame. And look, the real blame for what happened this year is with the people around Joe Biden. They never should have let him run for another term. They should have had him drop out in the summer of 2023 and let the Democrats have a nomination process and come up with a strong candidate. I'm not sure that it would have made any difference in the ultimate outcome, because it was the fundamentals that decided this election. It was inflation and the economy and the border problems that set the stage for this victory. But they could have had a better candidate. They could have had a better process, and they perhaps could have distance themselves a little bit more from the Biden record. But look, when things go bad, you want to point the blame in lots of ways. The vice president has a little bit of an embarrassing video out on social media today. I take it that somebody on her staff was just ticked and put that clip out there in some manner. I don't really know what's going on. But there's going to be a lot of circular firing squads on the Democratic side of the aisle in the coming months.
Well, I just have to give you the award today for the greatest understatement of the day. A little bit of an embarrassing video. Come on, Scott. That was one of the weirdest things I've seen in politics in a long time. And I just wonder, and it was posted initially on the Democrat Twitter X site. And when we started the show, we opened the show with the clip. That had been viewed in less than 21 hours. It had been viewed 30 million times.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Right. And there are going to be people who are going to say, it was all Harris's fault. It was somebody else's fault. It was the pollsters' fault. It was the campaign ads. I would actually argue that for as bad as things were for the Democrats, there is some evidence that the campaign was effective. And basically that evidence is in non-battleground states, where there wasn't a lot of money spent, the Democrats typically lost about 6 points, about 6 percentage points shifted to the Republican side. And in the battleground states, it was only about a 3-point shift. Obviously, it mattered more in the battleground states, in those swing states. And I don't know if spending $1 billion to get a 3-point switch is, a really good return on your money. But they did have some impact, starting with a losing hand. And yes, that video, however you want to describe it, with my understatement or in any other way, that's just evidence of what we're going to see. That's to say Harris, shouldn't have won.
Well, there's no leader really in the DNC at this point. They're not going to select a new leader till after the swearing in of Donald Trump. So it kind of feels like this is a rudderless ship at this point. So we might expect any kind of craziness to come out in the next 53 days. This could be a fun ride, Scott. I'm just saying, we should hang on.
Well, it is going to be a fun ride. I guarantee you that. But I do want to, let's just put a little more perspective into this, that why it's so important to find some common ground for the next 2 years. We're now a nation that has had 10 presidential elections where nobody's won more than 53% of the vote. We haven't had a double-digit victor since 1984 when Ronald Reagan won 49 states. That's bad for America because nobody gets a governing mandate. The losing team always feels we just missed. We've had 6 consecutive change elections in a row where partisan control of one branch of government has changed hands, at least one. That's some instability that we're seeing. It is very important, that we try to find ways to bring an end to that. And what that requires is listening to people and governing and meeting the needs of what folks want. I'm hopeful that we'll see a lot of progress in the next 2 years. But if you and I are having this discussion in 2 years, we'll know the results from the midterm elections.
Yes, we will. Great clarity, great information. Scott Rasmussen, president of RMG Research and founder of the Napolitan Institute, and a great piece in the Washington Times. Thank you, Scott. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.